Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are and whatever time you see this video. Today we have a special guest with us, Mr. Mike Jumblaskas. He is running for State Senate in New York from the 28th district, and he is representing Independence Party, and he has aligned with the Republican Party in the state. So welcome to the show, Mr. Mike. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm doing well. I
Thank you.
appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, thank you for coming. And we would like to know a little more about your career and how you got into politics. And if you can tell us more about yourself, will be great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, it's funny. The first political debate I got into was with my Aunt Thelma, who is my father's mother's sister. Oh, in 1968, when I was 8 years old, over the Humphrey Nixon presidential election, and lasted for about. I was on Humphrey's side at some reason. I don't know why now. I can't remember, but it was funny. After about 15, 20 minutes, my Aunt Thelma threw up her hand. Why am I arguing with this 8-year-old? But she never let me forget that argument till the day she died. But I've always followed politics. Didn't really get super involved in politics to 1992, the first Ross Perot campaign. Um, I was looking at the race. I didn't like the direction the country was going in. I thought the national debt, which was only 4 trillion at the time, now it's 24 trillion, I think, 25 trillion, with the money we've been spending. And so I was initially looking at Songus, but then I heard Ross Perot and went and started working from him. I started answering phones and been involved ever since.
Very nice. Okay. So,
Sorry.
no, go ahead. You were saying something.
Then in 1994, the Independence Party of New York was started by Tom Golisano, and you have to run to become an official party in New York. Your governor's candidate has to get at least 50,000 votes. Tom Golisano ran. He was a billionaire from upstate New York, and I jumped on that, and that's how the Independence Party started, and immediately joined that. But I was also involved with Unite We Stand, which is the organization that came out of the Ross Perot campaign in '92. There's a 401c3, which was basically a political action, education nonprofit, and I was, in the leadership of that in New York State. I also, like I said, joined the Independence Party. In which joined the National Reform Party in '96 when Ross Perot ran. And I've been on the national committee. I've been on the state committee here in New York. I was the chair of the legal committee for the Reform Party. I was the chair of the convention, one of the national conventions, and I've had many different positions in the party. Right now, I don't hold a party position, but I still help candidates all over the place. I help Democrats, Republicans. If I like the candidate, I'll help them. Most of the time, I don't get paid for it. And I've been, like I said, I've been heavily involved since '92. And right now, I'm running for state senate in the 28th district because things need to change. They definitely need to change. We can't keep going the way we're going. I can't hear you, sir.
I'm sorry. Sorry about that. In America, I mean, we hear about two parties, either Democratic Party or Republican Party. So generally, either people get elected from one of these two ticket or party lines. So what made you to choose Independence Party?
Well, I think if you actually look at what happened, '92 is a prime example. Ross Perot got almost 20% of the vote, and he was saying things differently. He actually changed policy throughout the whole '90s. probably about 70 to 75% of his platform actually got instituted over the next couple of years. Watered down version, but it was instituted by both the Democrats and Republicans because they were scared. I think the problem is with the two-party system, it's too easy to demonize the other side. When you have three, four, five parties, it's harder to demonize one side. And also the two parties sometimes don't represent everybody. And that's part of the problem. And we have such a low voter turnout compared to most of the world. When you think about it, in Iraq, Afghanistan, when the voters are under threat of death, they have to dye their thumb purple so that they know people that voted. And you had the Taliban, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, all these things saying, we're going to kill you, and they still turn up at an 85 to 90% turnout. We're lucky in the United States if we get a 55 to 60% turnout in national elections. And in local elections, our last mayoral's race, we had a 24% turnout of registered voters. That's not eligible voters, that's registered voters. So people are looking for something different. And I think that's why I've been in the Independence Party and trying to help other third parties grow to become major players. And if you look at the history of third parties in this country, usually a lot of times they come up and they will change one of the major parties' platforms because if they start getting traction. And also the other fallacy is, like in New York State, we do have a lot of elected Independence Party people to local offices. The highest is state assemblyman right now. But, we probably have at least 30 or 40 people throughout the state of New York that are elected just on the independence line.
Oh, very good to hear that. I mean, at least you have a few officials from your party elected to the positions on the state, which is nice. Not many parties. Libertarian Party is one of the largest, third party, I would say, after the Democratic and Republican Party. They have only one, I think, congressman in the Congress right now, probably. It's a little challenging for the, other than these two.
He's a Republican. He didn't run on the. He's a Republican, not a liberal. Even though he has libertarian bents, he's still a Republican. But the libertarians do have probably 400 to 500 people elected to local offices across the country.
Across the country, very nice. Good. Yeah, most of the libertarians, these two parties are close in ideas and ideologies, and most of the time, I think Libertarian Party also pulled in the Republican Party candidates to run for their party ticket. That's a different topic. We'll get into that one later for the time. Thank you. Coming back to what made you to run for the state senate in New York in the New York State?
This state is a mess. If you look at how it's being run, crime's on the rise. Our budgets are outrageous. Take for example, even though it's $88,000 now, $88 billion budget for New York City. It was 94 last year, but because of coronavirus and the economics, there's only 31 countries in the world that have a higher budget for their national budget than New York City does. And Israel's budget's basically the same as New York City's, and it's the same amount of people for their national budget. And we still are misspending money, the waste, very little gets done properly, and it is a problem. And we need to have legislators and people in executive power that's going to say enough's enough. Just throwing money at a problem doesn't solve it. For example, New York City spends almost $28 billion a year just on its school budget. Yes, our schools are one of the worst in the country, our K through 12. That's because of misspending. Because when you look at it, you have, in the 1960s, for example, there was 2.34 teachers for every administrative and support staff in our school system, K through 12. Now, there is basically 1-to-1 or over 1-to-1. and you want and since then the administrators' pay has went up almost twice, not twice, about one fifth, sorry, one half as much as teachers' pay since the 1960s. So the money's not getting into classrooms; it's going to other things besides teaching our kids, and that's part of the problem. And that's why we need to look. So a lot of it's not money; it's how the money's being spent, how it's being, the policies they're putting in place, and you can tell. One of the problems I have with especially our school system is that most of it is trying to get people to go to college when not everybody has to go to college. We need to go back to more vocational studies type of schools. We need to work with the businesses in our country, in our state, in our city, and everything else, and say, okay, what skill sets do you need now? What skill sets do you think you see you need in the future? And then we'll form a curriculum so that we can actually get these kids right out of high school without going to college the skill sets they need to be employable. That's the more practical sense. Instead, our current chancellor, Mr. Carranza, is basically putting his giving up on the low performing schools and saying, okay, because our Black and Latino students aren't getting into our elite schools as much, so he's changed the system from a pure test-based system to a whole set of ranges that are going to put kids into a school where they might not be prepared and have to struggle. Instead of working to repair these schools, and that's the problem. Over the last, most of these people have been in power for decades, and they've given up on fixing schools. Yeah, you look at the charter schools, which our current mayor and a lot of our elected Democratic elected officials are fighting against. These charter schools are taking kids from the exact same neighborhoods, same economic condition, and they're succeeding at a superior rate. It's not the kids, it's the regulation, it's the curriculum. And I grew up in the military. My father was in the Air Force for 22 years. So I've been in a mixed community all my life. I went to school, matter of fact, in the 60s and 70s, probably about 20% of every military base had mixed marriages of all different types. So I grew up with that. And since we were all in the same socioeconomic condition because our pay ranges were that different, unless you were an officer's kid. But if you go through our school system, you had all kinds of races and everything succeeding. So a lot of this is socioeconomic, and also a lot of it is the curriculum they're trying to teach. They're putting too many restrictions on teachers to actually teach to their class, because each class is different.
Gotcha. Is it? I mean, I've been hearing multiple things about the education system. The education is mostly, funded by the local government level, city level, and some money comes from the state level, and some money is coming from the federal level. And the regulations are also, some of the testing requirements that are coming from the federal level, like a Common Core and all those things. So even recently we have been hearing, our president saying, that's a political thing, let's not, I don't want to get there, but there are regulations coming from federal, state, and city. So which is the more kind of problem or kind of creating hindrance in the growth?
Well, the thing is with a Common Core, that wasn't mandated. It's voluntarily picked up by the states and the locality. Well, the states control the localities, but the thing is how the federal government gets the states and everything to implement it, because there's usually money to go along with it, and they want the money. I think Common Core has been a failure, an absolute failure. And because you can see it when kids are coming out. I think our education system, even up into the university level, has deteriorated so much since I went to school. And I saw that I graduated from college in 1983, went into the Army to pay off my student loans, and then went back to college in 87. And I actually saw a drop off between the students from 83 to 87. It wasn't that big. Then I went back to grad school back in the mid 90s, and I saw a drop off then too. Now, it could be also because I went to Hunter College, and I thought it was funny that in the introduction, I took urban affairs, in the introduction to urban affairs class, this is graduate work, and they wanted me, the professor wanted me to give an outline, basically give my introduction, everything else for my term paper, and I'm going like, this is grad school. I'm saying, first of all, I don't write that way, and you'll get it at the end of the semester, and I'll rest on my grade. I'm going like, okay, but I'm going like, why are you hand-holding somebody in grad school? And the school was rated one in the top 10. I think it was rated number 9 at the time in urban affairs school. And they're having you do that also with the speech. They said if you wanted the whole written speech given to them before I gave it, I'm going like, I don't speak that way. I speak impromptu. I think about what I want to say the night before, and then I get up and go and speak. That's how I've spoke most, since college. So I said, I'll rest on my performance. But this hand-holding, even into grad school, that really bothered me. And then when you see a lot of the kids coming out of college now, even high school, they know so little on so many different facts. That's one of the problems we're having right now with all these protests, because they don't know their history. They haven't either been taught, or they're changing history and only bringing certain things up. When they're tearing down statues of General Grant, when they're tearing down statues of and other people, they have no clue what they're doing. They either have no clue about history, what they're doing, or they're doing it because they're lying to us. It's all about slavery, and they're lying to us, about different things. Because when you look at it, most of them are, even the 2 of the 3 founders and leaders, Black Lives Matter, have stated are communists, and we want to push a socialist agenda. So they need to tear down what our society is, and that's a problem. And it all started with our education system, because we're not teaching kids skills that they can get a decent job when they get out, unless you're learning tech skills. If you're going for computer programming, engineering, a doctor, stuff like then you have skills that you can be hired very quickly right out of college, or nothing else, hang up your own shingle and produce your own stuff. Whereas most other people, if you're coming out of college with a philosophy degree and think you're going to be hired right away, you're mistaken. And that's part of the problem.
Gotcha. I mean, you kind of address the philosophical, way of teaching at the schools and the college level. So, what is the issue with the current college system, where the tuition fees is going up and too much, and scaring away many students from getting into the college, and even if they get into the college, they are worried about the debt they will have, and it is hard for them to repay. So these kind of, and also even the economy is booming. We have 2 different kind of things. The economy is booming, no doubt. Till us COVID-19 hit us. But the gap was widening. People were getting richer, and some people were staying wherever they are. So that kind of gap has created a lot of issues. Affordability, basically affordability in the country, affordability by a common man. So that has created a lot of issues in healthcare or college education. So that has triggered another movement in the country, which is the Green Party movement, or Bernie Sanders movement, where they say we need to have a free college education and single payer healthcare, this thing. So let us right now address the free college. Why, is it, are you suggesting anything, free college kind of thing, or what are you suggesting here?
Right. I don't agree with free college. You have to have some skin in the game. If your parents are paying or you get a full college scholarship, whether it's academic or athletic, that's fine. You actually earn that by your grades and your work or your athletic skills. But I put myself through college. The military back in the 70s didn't make much money. I worked anywhere between 35 to 45 hours a week, mostly washing dishes, earning minimum wage, which was $3.10 at the time. And, you know, I took out the student loans, and I knew what I was working for. I knew I was there. And I actually told some of the professors, you're working for me because I'm paying for this thing. Some of them liked it, some of them didn't. But that's a whole different story. But now, one of the problems is a lot of the kids that are going to college, and I even think the parents don't understand the economic burden, not all of them, but some of the parents don't understand the economic burden they're putting on their kids. If you're going to be an elementary school teacher, you shouldn't go to Columbia if you have to pay the full freight. Because an elementary school teacher is not going to start off with that being paid that much money. In New York City, they're probably going to be starting off about 45. If you go out into other parts of the country, you might be starting at $30,000 a year. So there's no way you're going to pay off $150,000 in student loans, and when you are young enough to enjoy life, because you're always going to be paying those student loans off. So if you go to a state college, you're not going to owe that much money, and you're going to be able to pay it off quicker. But because, like I said, I went into the Army, and that helped pay off my student loans. So I want to set up a system like that also for college students. So basically that, you do some type of community service and you can work. There's some programs out there now, but I want to make it more universal. So maybe you go tutor kids. Maybe you, go into a nonprofit and help fix their computer or whatever, skill set you have, whatever is needed. Because right now, this country, especially this state, this city, does not have the financial wherewithal to fix everything and continue operating everything they do, even though they have such a big budget, they just miss the money. So say they work 10, 15 hours a day for a full year, that might pay off 20% of their student loan, 30% of their student loan. We have to work out the details. But this way, after 5, 6 years, they might have their whole student loan paid off between what they worked on the side to pay that off and what they were making payments. And so they'll be out of debt. Still, they'll be in their 20s and they can actually start a family without this debt hanging over them. The other thing I want to do is, I can only do it with the state and city colleges. I want to have the presidents come in and say, hey, why are you spending so much money? Because when I went to school, a lot of the back office staff was work study kids. Nowadays, a lot of the back office staff is permanent employees. They're getting paid a higher percentage, plus all the benefits and everything else. That's one of the reasons, tuition has went up so much, because now they have to support that. When I went to school, you might have, in the bursar's office, for example, you might have 2 permanent employees and 15 work study students. Now you have 3 or 4 work study students and you have 12 permanent employees. Now you know why the cost is going up. You also look at it. When I went to school, the average wage probably for a mid-sized college president was probably $200,000, maybe $250,000. Now mid-sized are getting paid close to $1 million. This is why costs are going up. They're overbuilding. They're making, dorm rooms, basically went to school, were 4 walls and that was it. Now they're better than hotel rooms. And that's like, and that's what we have to address and say, you're misspending, you're putting kids in serious economic trouble for 10, 20, 30 years because you're this expensive.
Gotcha. I see your point. Administrative costs going up, and then because of the administrative costs going up, where the tuition fees are going up. Looks like, I don't know, the coronavirus is giving a different direction to that. By pushing everybody to the online. And I don't know what's going to happen. The future action of the colleges or the future way of education will be. We don't know. We'll see. We'll learn it more in few days. Few months. Sorry.
They still want to charge full pay. They're not lowering their tuition, and one of the reasons why they're not lowering their tuition is because they have all that massive staff. Whereas if they were like when I went to school, mostly work study, they wouldn't have that problem.
That is true. Hopefully they will learn, and yes. Sorry.
Problems with colleges too is when I went to college back in the early 80s, most of the professors were tenure or on their way to tenure. A lot of colleges now are hiring adjunct professors that teach one or two classes, and they're living like they're college students because they're getting like $15,000 a year for teaching those two classes. So they have to do other things on the side. So that's a problem too. We're paying exorbitant amounts of money for school, and you're getting teachers that have to worry about paying for themselves because they're just teaching doesn't pay their rent and everything else now. So there's so many different problems, and a lot of things, nobody looks at the core problems, especially our politicians. Almost every single bit of legislation, especially coming out of our legislative body up in Albany, is so superficial. They don't look into the unintended consequences of it, and they don't look at the underlying problems. All they do is put a Band-Aid on, and things actually make things worse in a lot of respects.
Gotcha.
Prime bills that we can see that happen to was the bail reform law that the state legislator and Governor Cuomo signed it, which basically says, except for a handful of crimes, people are released. We had an incident 2 weeks ago where there's, I'm going to call him a thug. He punched this 92-year-old woman in a walker walking down the street. He was arrested 103 times. And since the bail reform law, he was arrested 3 times prior to that, all for assault. And every time he just got a bench warrant saying, come back when your trial's there. So he committed 4 crimes, 3 crimes after his first one from the beginning of this year. And there's multiple crimes that are happening because the police have to release them. And this is a problem because they didn't think, they said too many people are being held in Rikers Island or jail for too long without bail. So to address it, they got completely rid of all bail. You couldn't consider what their criminal past was. Like I said, the crimes were really, some of them were outrageous that you could get let out for. You had a guy that committed 4 bank robberies. The police picked him up. They brought him in. He got released. That same day, he committed 2 more bank robberies. The only reason why he's in jail because bank robberies are a federal crime, so the feds took him into jail. Mm-hmm. And we have, we need better leaders up there that aren't worried about just getting reelected, worrying about getting to the heart of the problem. One of the things I would do to alleviate that is I have this work probation. So minor crimes, you would basically, similar to what I did with colleges, you would work to pay it off. So if you lived in a NYSER project, well, guess what? You're going to help clean that up, help fix things up. You will have to work 8-hour days, unless you have a job or you're in school. Then you will work after work on Saturdays and Sundays. But once you complete your probation without getting in trouble, your record will be expunged. You won't even have to tell an employer that you were on work probation. So there are other ways to do things than just to let everybody out of jail. I will go on that because I would say one of the other things is because our forefathers stated, justice delayed is justice denied. So I would say if you're sitting in jail, except for a capital crime, like for murder or something, if your case isn't heard within 3 months, you are released without prejudice, and they will not be able to bring that crime back up against you again. So, I think that would also help. And that's what I'm saying. You need people up in Albany that will think through things. I don't care if an idea comes from the left, the right. I want practical government that works. And then when you look at, say, my policy got implemented, and we review it after 6 months and say, okay, is it working the way we thought it was? Do we have to tweak it here and there? And that's what we need to do. Too many of our politicians, and from city council all the way up to Congress, once they pass a law, they never review it and see how it's actually doing. And we need people to do that, and we don't have that.
Thank you very much for your views and the perspective on this particular topic. Criminal justice changes. Criminal justice law changes. I think recently got in the approved in the New York Assembly or Congress. So we got your views on that. So what are your views on current COVID-19 situation in the US, and also how the federal government responded and how the state government has responded, and how is it right now in your state and your district? Can you tell us a little more about that, please?
Basically, I don't fault some of the things that came out from the government, especially early on, because we didn't know what we were facing. The virus, now they're saying it probably started in maybe September of October in China. China didn't let the WHO didn't let the CDC into it to see what was going on. So there was a big delay. We were getting mixed messages from the World Health Organization, the CDC. The CDC did screw up in the first batch of testing. It got contaminated and screwed up, which slowed us down. We've caught up since then. We had a shortage of ventilators. And a lot of that was, almost to blame for part of that, because about 3 or 4 years ago, we had a supply of ventilators sitting in a warehouse somewhere, and he sold them. So when it came back, it's all like, okay, now we're never going to need that many, and all of a sudden we did, because one of the problems is most of our politicians, and actually most people, don't think about the worst case scenario. They say everything's fine. That will never happen. And, prime example is on that, and I'll get back to COVID. Is I work for the New York City Department of Transportation. I work in the division that paves the street, fills the potholes, and stuff like that. But before, I used to work for the wireless, handling the BlackBerries, cell phones, iPads, all that stuff. And I was on the under Mayor Bloomberg's, the mayor's citywide wireless committee to talk about things. And I brought up, because this was after 2003, when basically the whole eastern seaboard electricity went down. And they were talking about, everything should go wireless. And I'm going like, wait a minute, we're emergency services. We can't do that. We need backups here and there. And I said, even though the major carriers put more backups for their towers, they still only had 24 hours of service. So if we're out longer than that, we're not going to be able to communicate. So when Sandy came along, it knocked out electricity across wide swaths of the city, not the whole city, but different parts of the city, and they were out for a couple of weeks. And so we had to come up with ingenuity and intuitive ideas to try to get things done. So, for example, DOT at some traffic lights, we got a Prius, and we ran the Prius to run the traffic lights. We hooked it up to the traffic lights. So now they have backup generator. Each of the we changed it now, but nobody wants to listen to it. That an emergency is going to happen and to be prepared. And that's what our government's supposed to do. And New York State and New York City failed completely on the COVID. And then, also the major problem we had there too is, one of the things that I've been saying since the 90s, and so has Trump. We've shipped too much of our manufacturing overseas, especially to China. And China has never been an ally. They're just as Machiavelli said, you don't have allies, you just have friends for the moment. And that moment with China flips back and forth every single day. So we didn't have the PPE manufacturing here. So when everybody was saying, oh, we're running out of masks, oh, that's because 80% of them were produced in China? We're not thinking. Our drugs and everything else. So we need to bring, especially our emergency manufacturing back here for products like that. Circuit boards and a lot of different things. But because, and the other problem was the United States went on a just-in-time, because of the bean counters, the accountants, inventory system. So they would only have maybe a week's worth of supplies on hand at a hospital because they knew they could call up and the supply would be there. Well, being in the military, that when an emergency happens, your supply chain can break down immediately. And nobody in the civilian world ever thought about that or ever cared about that. Now we've woken up that we have to do that. So one of the things I think New York State should do, if I get to Albany, I'm going to put this in, that at least 1/3 of our PPE needs will have to be produced in New York State. Maybe we team up with Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Vermont, and some of the other states next to us, and actually, so that factory that gets built here will have basically be able to sell everything. They'll have the customers they need. So that's one of the things I want to do. But then when you're going back to the response, Cuomo really screwed up, sending back the COVID seniors back to the nursing homes. We had tons of hotels. He could have been sending them there. There was massive tents set up in Central Park that were barely ever used. We could have sent them there instead of sending back to the nursing homes, which the most vulnerable people were. I think some of it was he got I'm not going to forgive him for it because it's a different circumstance, but I do have because I used to take care of a friend who was a senior citizen, who was 92 when he died, and he was in nursing homes. I was his power of attorney and everything else. And every time he went to the hospital, when he came back out, he's not assured to get back into that nursing home. That nursing home doesn't have to let him in. Somebody probably knew that, and that's why they said, we'll do that. But, that will force the nursing homes to take those patients back. But they should have stated that they can come back after they were cleared of the COVID, after they did their 14-day, quarantine. But instead, he sent them back immediately, and they weren't held up for it.
Gotcha.
So it's still Cuomo's fault.
That's, I mean, yeah, we have been hearing similar issues with multiple states. I mean, where, I mean, seniors have been sent back to the nursing homes, and where other people got affected, yeah, it's a serious problem. And now some states, Michigan, they have come out with a new law saying that they should not send senior citizens back to the same nursing home. So they are changing the laws right now, and hopefully things will improve for senior citizens, because they are the most vulnerable in this case. So we got your views on that one. Thank you. And coming back to this, at the same time, the COVID-19 time, we have another issue, social issue, which is called Black Lives Matter movement. So what is your view and opinion on Black Lives Matter movement right now?
The George Floyd was murdered, and there's no doubt about it. Everybody agreed that. Left, right said that was absolute murder. The cop should be charged and convicted in that. But I'm not the jury. The jury has to hear it. Everybody's innocent till proven guilty, but it's pretty hard when you have film of him doing it, so he'll probably be convicted. But I think now the protest initially, because of that, I agreed with, but not the riot. There's a difference between protesting and rioting. There's a difference between protesting and destruction of private and public property. And, too many people say, oh, okay, it's peaceful protesting. Well, you have some that are peaceful protesters, and then you have people that want to destroy this country. You have people that are admitted communists, and they want to overturn our whole Constitution. They want to get rid of free speech, which our country is based on. That is the problem. Now, then they went even super further by saying, let's defund the police. Initially, it was just, okay, first it was, let's retrain the police, better training. Now it was defund the police, which some cities have started doing. And then what happened? We want to completely get rid of the police and reinvent the police, as crime is escalating in almost every major city in this country by a lot. It's not just a little bit here and there. New York City, for example, in the month of June, we had more murders than we had since the Giuliani administration. That's a problem. During at the beginning of Giuliani administration, we had over 2,000 deaths a year. We got it down to a low about right around 300. Now it's escalating again. The police are demoralized. It's not only because of the Black Lives Matter movement. It's also because of our leadership telling them to stand down. You can't arrest. You arrest people, and then the DAs let them out of office. Everybody's screaming at the police. Yet you have people, I'll say rioters, not the peaceful protesters, and not even the peaceful protesters are as peaceful as they say they are. But throwing bricks at them, throwing Molotov cocktails at them, literally fighting with the cops, hitting them, stabbing them, throwing Molotov cocktails at their police cars with 4 people in it, 4 cops in it. That's not peaceful protesting. And then you have, they're also upset because they arrest somebody, they take them in, and before they fill out the paperwork, the guy's back on the street, committing another crime. That's why the police are demoralized. That's why you have retirements. And when you have, a police department demoralized, they're under constant attack. The elected politicians, the feckless politicians, are telling them to stand down, don't do anything. Like in Seattle, they took over an area. And even after 2 people were killed, it wasn't until the protesters marched in front of the mayor's house in Seattle before she decided to break up the chats. And then when they went in there, the complete area looked like a war zone. There was graffiti everywhere. Boards were on the windows. You had broken glass. They destroyed the place. And you're seeing that everywhere they go. And that's got to stop. We got to break those up. And going back to what they call peaceful protest. Before this protest, most of these people were saying language, speech is more harmful than, actual physical violence. It does more damage. Cops, racists, calling them murderers. In their faces, they're screaming, shouting, spitting. And yet, most of the cops, there's been some incidents incidents that people have said that the police did wrong. But most of the cops were standing in line, basically just pushing the protesters back while they're getting cursed at, screamed at. Black officers were being called Uncle Tom, all kinds of other derogatory names. If speech is violence, as they say, then they were doing violence. That's the problem with the left. They're hypocrites. That's why I say the politically woke are intellectually broke, because they cannot defend their rights. All they can say, I feel bad. And when you try to argue with them, they start calling you names because they can't defend their positions, because they're undefensible. They're not based on logic. They're all based on feelings.
We got your perspectives on this particular topic, COVID-19, and then the Black Lives Matter, and then the police reforms. I mean, the way the people are treating police right now. Yeah, I mean, I know we have very good police people in many cities, and they've been helping the communities and helping the people. No doubt about it. There are few people who created the issue. I mean, every community, every society has some bad apples. Hopefully, I mean, things will come back to normal, and then we can have a peaceful atmosphere in the cities. But yeah, I will leave the topic there, and we got your perspectives. We'll go on to the different topic. I mean, if you got talk about the same topic, we can talk about it for hours together on the same thing. But I don't want to I don't want to get there. So I want to move on to another topic. See, in the US, I mean, we have everybody is passionate about the Second Amendment, and then I mean, like to have the guns and own the guns, which is that is our law. But at the same time, we have issues like, I mean, gun violence. I mean, mass shootings. How do you balance between your right and the safety of the community?
I am a supporter of the Second Amendment.
Yeah, Second Amendment.
My dad was a military cop for 22 years. I grew up with weapons, been firing them since I was 10 years old. I don't own one now. I live in New York City. I don't go hunting anymore. And, because, you look at it, and the thing is, because like I said, the military didn't get paid that much in the 70s, and we have 4 kids. My father always had a second job, and I've been working since I've been about 11, 12 years old, because I wanted my own money. My dad taught me the best lesson my father ever taught me is, I think I was like 11, maybe 12, and I went to my dad. There was an after-school trip, not part of the school, and I asked my dad, can I go? And I think it was like $5 or $3 or something like that. It was, so it was back in the 70s, so it wasn't that much money for a lot of things. And my dad's answer was, do you have the money? And I said, no. And he says, there's your answer. So I went out and started making money. But that's a side thing. So I've always been responsible. I actually bought my own gun when I was 16 years old. I used it for hunting. But we were brought up with respect for guns. We knew how dangerous they were. We knew how to clean them, the safety, and everything else. And we probably had 25 to 30 weapons in the house, between handguns and different rifles, and actually an AK-47. My father was in Vietnam, He ran into a 15-year-old Viet Cong sneaking into the base, Cam Bay, and he was actually able to talk the guy out because he was actually training the South Vietnamese to do base security. So he was able to take, talk the kid down, got the weapon, and he took it home as a souvenir. Now, how he got it back from Vietnam, I don't know. But my dad was was able to do things like that. But so, so I actually had an actual assault weapon, the most popular assault weapon in my house, and I never used it. And I was bullied a lot in junior high school because being in the military, you get transferred all over the place. Then when I went to Denver, we got bused. So got bused into a heavily black school, and then I got bused into a heavily Hispanic school. And for the first couple of years, I was bullied because I wouldn't fight back. Because after the first day I was in school at Smiley Junior High School, I got into a fight with a kid because I went into the class and it was a math class and the guy was supposed to be the smartest kid in the class. I came in, and because I already finished that book, because my last school I was in Delaware, the teacher actually said, we do the class in 2 speeds. You can either follow with the class or you can go as fast as you want through the book. So in the first half of the first semester, I actually finished that math book, and that was the one they were using. So I already knew everything from that book. So I got into the fight, got suspended. I lost that fight, by the way. I'll admit that. But got home, and my father said, "The next fight you get into, I'm going to kick your ass when you get home." I was more scared of my father than the kids. So I didn't get into another fight and that was in 7th grade. I didn't get into another fight till 9th grade. So,
Okay.
but the thing is, because I was bullied, I had access to all the weapons I needed. I had access with the ammo and everything else. I could have always taken that, but since I was brought up with how deadly a weapon is, actually firing them, seeing what it does to an animal when you're hunting them, and we ate everything we killed, we ate. So I was brought up with respect for nature and everything else. It's not so. I think it's more of a problem of education than actually having guns on the street. We need to get the guns out of the hands of the criminals. Even if we confiscated every single gun in this country, the crooks would still have them because they would go the black market. And because if you think about it, if we can't keep drugs out of our prisons, how are we going to keep guns out of criminals' hands? Machine guns are illegal for civilians to own in almost every country in the world. Yet you have crime being committed in England, which have very strict gun laws. Some criminals, they do fire these weapons. So you just can't say you can't have any guns, and you think that you'll be safe. That's a fallacy. Now, one of the things I do want to implement is mandatory training before you can buy a gun. And I'm talking probably about 40 to 50 hours of training, how to fire the weapon, how to clean the weapon, how to store it, it's safety, everything on that type of training, so that when you do buy a weapon, you know how to use it, you know what's safe. Now, like I said, we had so many weapons. There was 4 kids. We never played, and we also played with toy guns. We knew the difference between a toy gun and a real gun, so we never pointed a real gun at anything. And when we were really young, they were out of our reach. My father made sure he stored them in a place that we couldn't get to. Well, I could, but that's a different story. But I still had the respect. But these are the things that, I wasn't I did a lot of stuff when I was younger. Which my father I thought I got away with, but then when I was older, my father said, "Oh, I know you did that, that," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, I thought I got away with that." But, military cop as a father, you don't get away with too much.
Gotcha.
But the thing is, that's what we have to do. Because most people that really push gun control has never fired a weapon and doesn't really understand the uses. And also, one of the other big problems I have with this country and how they try to pass legislation is they try to pass legislation that's one size fits all. What works in New York City doesn't work in the Adirondacks. If your nearest neighbors, 5 miles away, why, and you can't own a gun, you have animals that can come up to your porch that could be dangerous. You have the two-legged animals that could be dangerous too if they do a home invasion. So why are we saying that person can't protect himself out in the middle of nowhere where he screams, nobody's going to hear? Even if he calls the police in time, it might take them 40 minutes to get there. So, and we have too much legislation that is exactly that way. One size fits all, and it doesn't work. I think responsible people should be able to own a firearm if they want to. And in today's world, crime is on the rise again. The police aren't getting there. Sometimes you have to defend yourself. And if you disarm everybody, you can't defend yourself.
Got you. We got your perspectives on that. I mean, you're mainly saying that, I mean, how you are brought up while you're growing up with the guns, and then how you're that also have an effect on how you deal with the guns, those the violence and those kind of things. Okay, that's important. And also you're promoting training, 40 hours of training before you own a gun. That's another thing which you're trying to promote. Okay.
Don't have that on a gun, you can't buy one.
Got by one. Gotcha. Good. Good. I mean, good proposals from your side, and we will leave it your perspectives to the audience and let them decide what they want to, what is right or wrong for them. So we leave it that way. And you also mentioned about in your campaign. I mean, small businesses are also important to our society. So what is your view, and how do you want to help or improve the environment for the small business if you are elected to the state senate? So what are your views and what are your plans to help the small business people, and which is very badly affected right now?
Right, yeah. The COVID has destroyed many, many small businesses. I have two friends that their businesses are closed now forever. They don't have the money to reopen, and they're gone. I have a couple others that are friends that are struggling. And we need to help support them. One of the things I want to say to everybody out there: stop shopping on Amazon and go support your local stores. That's if you don't want them to close. There's some things you might still can buy on Amazon, but go to your local stores and do some shopping there. That is super key. You need to keep them in business because they employ a lot of people. Now, on a grander scale, we need to reduce regulations on a lot of small businesses. We need to reduce taxes on a lot of small businesses. One of the things I want to do, too, is that, say, you give a tax credit to small businesses that hire new employees. So say you hire an employee making under $30,000 a year, you get to write off 60% a tax credit on that employee. If they're making between 30 and 50,000, 60,000, maybe 50%. Over 100,000, maybe 10% for the first year. And then you wean them off. This will help the small businesses hire people because we'll reduce their costs, and it will, basically let them survive with lower expenses and employ people that we need to also. So that generates the tax base and gets more people employed. One of the other big things we need to do is we need to lower the barriers, basically regulations, like you have to have a license to paint somebody's nails, they clip their nails, this small stuff like that, which is ridiculous, especially since we have had so many stores and small businesses close in the city, and more are going to, because basically from Midtown to Wall Street, you're going to have businesses that are not going, most of them probably going to go out of business. Because even as they can reopen, because first of all, our tourist industry is not coming back for a while. Broadway's not going to be able to show, put on a play until January. 65% of every ticket bought on Broadway was a tourist. So that means those 65% that wanted to go to a Broadway show usually went to a mill, went to a bar afterwards. So they help support that. Those people aren't going to come back to those small businesses. Plus all the tourists that did shopping for a lot of small businesses. Now you also is going to have another problem that's going to exacerbate these restaurants, bars, and other businesses, is that because of COVID, a lot of businesses are not going to be able to, they're not going to bring all their workers back. They're going to be rotating, probably working from home a couple days a week, working at the office until the virus is completely done. Some businesses, we're going to go, oh, we can operate without all these employees in one location. We'll reduce our footprint and get a smaller office and let most of our people work from home. Well, those people used to go to lunch at these restaurants, used to shop at these stores. Now they're going to be home. They're not going to come into Midtown New York, Manhattan, and actually go into these stores. They're not going to go into bars after work. They're not going to have lunch at these restaurants. Even the companies that used to do big catering events aren't going to be able to do that. So these restaurants are not going to be able to survive, especially because the landlords probably aren't going to want to lower the rents because their expenses are still what they were because they mortgaged their buildings to the hilt. So, and, like, for example, this is a couple of years old, one deli down in Rockefeller Center was paying like $500,000 a month for rent. A deli. It's a big deli, but still $500,000 for rent. There's no way they can keep that up. Because without the tourists, because probably 90% of their business was tourists. The other 10% were people that worked in Rockefeller Center. They're not coming back. That deli's gone. And it's been there for decades. And this is a problem. So we need to create more small businesses. So we need to create legislation that's going to help incentivize people to start new businesses. Whether it's some financial help, some expertise help, maybe some tax credits to the rent, to the landlords to let them rent the place. So that's the only way we're going to come back to, and this will also help the minority communities because we can actually, give a lot of minority communities some of these incentives to start businesses. I know a lot of friends of mine who are minorities that want to start businesses or are struggling in starting a business or want to expand businesses, and this is a way to help do that. And this is something we have to do. And if we don't do it, this city is not going to recover, and it's just going to get worse, and we're going to have more and more people leaving. And the tax base, it's a never-ending cycle, because as these stores close, as these so they're not paying the taxes, they're not paying their employees who are paying taxes. So downtown area and other areas around the city are going to go into decay. So the upper class and the middle class that can afford to move are going to move, which is going to reduce our tax base some more, which means the government has to cut some more. And like I said, it's a never-ending cycle. We have to stop that cycle now by having people create new businesses, new job opportunities, so we can stop the never-ending cycle of decline.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for your views and the perspective on all these topics. And do you have any message to our viewers or audience or your voters in the 28th district of New York State Senate?
Yes, please come out and vote on November 3rd. It's important that everybody votes and let their ideas get out. If you want to learn more about me, go to www.electmikez.com. I have plenty of other ideas that are unique that you won't hear almost any other politician saying, and because that's the way I think. I try to get to the core of a problem. So if you look at my position papers, I think there's going to be a lot that people will like from both sides, all sides. And thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for coming onto the show, sir, and wish you all the best in your elections and have a nice rest of the day.
Thank you very much. Enjoy.
Thank you.